Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call the village board meeting to order at 6 p.m. We'll do roll call. Nyla Fry. Here. Trisha Brown.
Here.
Sam Kaufman.
Here.
Kristen Runge.
Here.
Aaron Moran.
Here.
Joel Zitzelsberger.
Here.
Robert McPherson.
Here.
And then,
I'd like to make a motion to,
yep,
motion to nominate Sam Kaufman to chair tonight's meeting. Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain. Okay, thank
Motion
you.
carries.
Well, yeah, it just makes more sense to abstain on that. Confirmation of open meeting compliance.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on 3/14. The final agenda was posted in all three official posting locations on 3/12 and 3/13. And the final agenda and packet were made available online on 3/12. For those in the audience, please be sure you sign in for accurate record keeping. And anyone interested in making a public comment, please submit a form to me prior to that agenda item.
All right, public comment. I imagine we've got some forms over there to read.
We do. We actually have a written comment that was sent in and asked to be read out loud. So I would ask the chair to read that out loud. This is from Aisha Dale at 921 Lexington Way.
Okay, I will read this. I would like to see the village put out a statement of unified support of all Waunakee residents. I am proud of acknowledgements, initiatives, and decisions, examples, diverse flags, statements of support, land acknowledgements, and female representation that have been made in the last 10 years. I believe the community needs to know that no matter who sits on the board, that all people of Waunakee are represented and protected by the village board, staff, and supporting organizations. Other surrounding communities and police departments have sent out consistent messaging that puts people first. I would like us to join in solidarity. I think it is important that we show unity and support for all people. Thank you for reading and considering.
Thank you. Next up is Joel Lewis at 5299 Easy Street, Westport.
While Joel comes up, if anybody is online as an attendee and wishes to speak during public comment, please click raise hand now and we'll let you in.
Make sure the button on the microphone is green.
Okay, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Good evening and happy St. Patrick's Day. My name is Joel Lewis. I am the president of the Waunakee IDEA, so I'm representing the Waunakee IDEA. Just want to say that we are in favor and support of the approval of the resolution and continued support of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives within the village of Waunakee. It's just really important, especially at this time, that the village continues with their support of anybody who resides in the village, no matter what race you're of, what ethnicity, gender. So I just want to say that we're just in support of approval of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Krista Schmelk at 500 Hillcrest Drive, Waunakee.
Hi, I'm also here and wanted to share my support with this resolution, not only as part of the Waunakee IDEA, but I feel like this is the type of resolution that most of our city is going to support, and everything from telling my children about it to my faith to being able to look people in the eyes. I want this to go through, and it's important.
Thank you.
Next up is Linda Ashmore at 114 South Street, Waunakee.
Hi, I'm here to speak in support of the resolution also. I think it's really important during these trying times to really look at people of color, the LGBTQ community, the immigrant community. They all feel very threatened right now. And anything that we can do as a village to say you're welcome here, that's a tangible way, this is one of them. And so I think it's important that we pass it. And it is St. Patrick's Day. And the history of the Irish in America is they came fleeing a potato famine. And so they came to our country for a better life. And as unless we're Native American, we're all from immigrants. And so I just want us to kind of keep that in mind as we try to treat people like we would like to be treated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Meredith Glick at 104 Canterbury Court, Waunakee.
Hello. My name is Meredith, and I've lived with my family here in Waunakee for the past 10 years. And over this time, the village has continued to change and grow significantly. One thing that comes to mind is that in my son's 6th grade class of around 22 people, there are 7 different languages spoken within the class. So by fostering, and I support the resolution for DEIA. So by fostering an inclusive environment, we ensure that every resident, regardless of their background, feels valued, respected, and has an equal opportunity to thrive. It makes our village a better place and a stronger community, whether we're talking about economic vitality, or other measures. So I think it's really important that we support it.
Thank you.
Next up is Rebecca Gottwald at 206 West 2nd Street, Waunakee.
Hi, I'm here today to express my strong support, like others have said, for the resolution that reaffirms the Village of Waunakee's ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. This resolution is an important first step in ensuring that all members of our community, regardless of their background or identity, feel safe, valued, respected, and included. As our community continues to grow and evolve, it's crucial that we recognize the needs of marginalized groups and actively work to create an environment where everyone can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have no further comment cards. I don't know if there's anybody
If
online.
anyone on Zoom would like to speak, please push the raise hand button and Todd can bring you in to do that.
No hand.
Anybody else in the audience interested in speaking on this or any other items? Okay, then we will move on to our consent agenda. Would anybody like anything pulled, or I'd look for a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
And a quick note, Sam, just for those who are in the audience, by virtue of that resolution that you appeared for was on the consent agenda, it stands as approved by the board.
Okay, reports and announcements. I sort of skimmed through the ones, some of them obviously did not meet, so we will start with the Plan Commission. Anybody on the Planning Commission can?
I was
Oh, you were not there?
I was not there
Oh, I see.
on vacation.
Let me unmute. I'm sorry. I have a little bit of a delay here. So the Plan Commission met, and the three major items that we reviewed is a site plan improvement for Octopi, who is reconfiguring some of the driveways in which their trucks enter. That was one thing. RJ Heating and Cooling is adding a building to their property to accommodate some expansion that they're doing. And DCAR is also expanding their building. So those were the three major things that we accomplished at Plan Commission.
Next one is the Parks and Recreation Committee. At our last meeting, we approved the annual park use and fee waiver request for Wanafest. We discussed the policy on decorative lighting, and we have lights on the back of the Village Center and the Park Shelter and Village Park now. So at some point, there's going to be a policy revision that's going to come to the Village Board on that policy. And we also approved the Rough Parks PAYGO project list for 2025 that was approved in the consent agenda. Yeah, and the 6 Mile Creek presentation. Yeah, I forgot about that. We had a wonderful presentation from the Friends of 6 Mile Creek. Next one is the Public Works Committee.
Public Works met on March 6th, and we have many projects going on this summer to keep all of our eyes out for. One is Century Trail Project, which is from Lockmore to Cup Road. We have Pavement Rehabilitation from Manchester Crossing to Payne and also Dolan. Road projects include South Division, Dover Drive, Fish Street, and the South Division and Dover Drive include pavement rehabilitation. There will be sidewalk repairs in Capitol Estates, Country Air, and Waunakee Heights, and all of our sidewalk repairs and projects include ADA, meeting ADA standards. And we're also looking at a best management program for our retention areas. And this year we will be looking at 8 storm retention areas to see what we can do to maintain and improve those. Thank you.
Next one is the Sustainable Waunakee Ad Hoc Committee.
I can grab that one. Basically, we met with MSA and had a fantastic, although a little bit long discussion about making progress on the sustainability plan.
Waunakee Area Fire District.
We had we had the special meeting specifically to hire the attorney that we've engaged with. We had some discussion that night of the objective that we wanted the attorney to achieve for the district, and we are expecting to get a report at the next fire district meeting, which should be next Monday, on the next steps that the fire district will take in light of the village's withdrawing from the district.
I could add some extra context a little bit. The attorney that the board hired did connect with myself and the village attorney for background on information related to the village's progress in our discussions and our actions to date. I thought it was a very good phone call where clearly their attorney was seeking information and clarification. And I sense that he's interested in being almost like a mediating force or support to the board for the parties that are working on this. I'll add that he also is interested in reaching out to Robert Whitaker to consult with him for, again, background and details to the recommendations that Robert had made in his study for full context and explanation for their attorney. So positive points in terms of the willingness their attorney is showing in working with us.
Any other committees, boards, or commissions, or other announcements anyone would like to make?
Sam, would it be embarrassing if I called out my daughter who's here having to, as part of her UW Platteville class, witness a official board meeting?
Yes.
Go Platteville.
Okay, our first business item, discuss and take action on proposed ordinance amendment and resolution related to village board compensation.
This is prepared for you as a follow-up to your prior meeting. You provided direction on next steps. We shared that information with the village attorney, and he drafted 2 items here for your consideration tonight. The first is a change in our ordinance that essentially removes a specific dollar amount reference within the current code of ordinances and changes that to allow for modification by resolution. So first is the ordinance. The second is a resolution then, if you pass the ordinance, to make changes to the dollar amount identical to those that you were proposing at your last meeting. I think the one point that's important that we want to have clarification from the board, which then we can give you instruction on how to word the resolution, relates to when you want that implemented. We talked about how sitting board members can't actively change their own salary. So for those who are going to be reelected, that would qualify you for a new set of salary post-election. With the thought that you don't want part of your board receiving salary X while the other part of your board receiving salary Y, you may wish to delay adoption of the changes in your pay to essentially a year from now, which would be 4/21/26 as the effective date. If that doesn't matter to you, then the date would be 4/15/25. Either way, it's really a board policy prerogative, not a staff recommendation.
Okay, why don't we start with Aaron on this item?
Well, last meeting I had spoke about that I think I guess no one does this for the money, but I think it's important that time is recognized and it's a luxury to be able to volunteer. And so I think this is appropriate to like increase the pay. I'm fine doing implementing it a year later, and I like how we split it up so that it could be hopefully easily updated in the future. Sorry, I usually don't go first, but
Fine.
yeah, so I guess I'm in support of this. I don't know that I don't strongly feel like we need to wait, but I think it's appropriate too, because yeah, if half of the board is getting paid more than the other half of the board, that's a little odd, but.
Tricia?
Yeah, I agree with Aaron that it is just for the awkwardness of it, maybe makes sense if there's not opposition to that, just to have it all implemented at the same time. I am 100% for increasing the, because it hasn't been adjusted in such a long time, that making this modification now makes sense. And I like, and based on the conversation that we had last time, of amending the resolution so that it doesn't have that set dollar amount in place. So I'm good with this.
Kristen?
I agree. I agree with implementing it after the next election in 2026, for 21-26, and think that it's a good idea that we adjust it.
Joe?
I'm not a huge fan of doing this, but that being said, I think the amounts are reasonable. It hasn't been adjusted in quite a long time, so I can support that. As far as when, I think 2026 is my preference there as well.
Nyla?
I agree with what everyone has said, and nobody does this for the compensation because, quite frankly, I think we could go make more money at Burger King or McDonald's. But one thing that did occur to me, because many, many years ago when I was on committees, there were a few times I needed to pay for childcare. And so actually, I was really serving the community because I not only came to the meeting, but I also had to pay out of pocket funds for childcare. So what my way of thinking about this is perhaps this would open things up a bit. So somebody who's a young parent could perhaps get involved in the community with this. With that being said, I would agree that 4/21/26 would be the time that I would like to see it start.
Robert?
I'll keep it brief. I'm all for 2026 as the start date so that there's parity, and a little bit like Joe, I don't think too much about how much is being paid on this because like Nyla said, I don't think any of us are doing this for the money. So it is fair though for future trustees that come after me that they should have an adjustment based off of all the inflation and everything that's happened. So I'm, can get behind that.
Well, I think we're all in agreement. I pretty much agree with what everybody else stated. So I will move to adopt an ordinance amending section 2-36 of the Code of Ordinances, Village of Waunakee, related to salaries for elected officials.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Anybody want to make the second motion?
I'll move to approve the resolution regarding salaries for elected officials with an effective date of, what would the date need to be for payment?
No,
That's fine. It's April 21st, 2026.
Yep.
Yep, that would be the, when it starts, that's not when the first payment
Correct.
is, it's three months after that.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it.
With that approval, we did want to seek policy directive. You had a conversation at your last meeting about frequency of disbursements. Right now, it's done quarterly, but staff believes we can be flexible if you wish to go monthly or every other week. So that would be just a policy directive we'd be seeking from the board. We'd be able to put that into practice.
Yeah, I think we did talk at the last one that every other week would be challenging because it doesn't, the the term year doesn't fit with the normal payroll year, but, once
Monthly
a
would,
monthly could be possible.
so what do you wish?
I think I was the one who brought that up, and I would say quarterly is fine if everybody else is still good with that.
I would echo that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, our next item, discuss and take action on a potential purchase of property at 105 East Second Street.
Okay, I'll start out by sharing that this does not, it's marked for closed session, but does not need it to go into closed session unless you actually want to talk about parameters regarding offer contingencies, anything related to actually offering purchase on the property. I'm not sure the board's there yet, but that would be the only reason I believe for you to go into closed session. At your last meeting, or when we last discussed this with the board, we reviewed options for how this property could be used, either by the village or by others. That's repeated in your memo on page 56. You also asked that we take a close look if the building inspector would be given permission to visit the property and inspect it inside and out. We were granted that permission. The inspector reviewed the property and presented a one-page summary of the findings. I can summarize the summary by telling you that the inspector told me that he didn't see any major defects in the property, nothing that would be structural that would make us, or in his opinion, any buyer be, concerned, extremely concerned about making a purchase and face serious structural issues to address. With that said, he did say that if a user were to come in and have reason to install equipment that would bring issues about flames or heat into question, like a restaurant, installing restaurant equipment, that then would bring into potential issues of having a sprinkler. In addition, residential use is something that might bring into question the need for sprinklering. Now, obviously, that would be a major investment for any potential future user to sprinkle the entirety of the property. Otherwise, there was nothing that he shared that was of extreme concern. So with that, we have it back on the agenda for the village board to have further discussion, asking us additional questions, and provide direction to staff on any next steps.
But we start with Niall this time.
Okay, as much as I love historical buildings, I mean, they just pull at my heartstrings. I just don't see placing funds into a project or a building such as this or a site such as this at this time. None of us know. I mean, we're on pretty footing that we've never dealt with before. So I'm always one who is more cautious than some. But I think we need to be very on top of what we're spending and really consider it heavily before we do spending. Even though, like I said, I hope that if this building is sold that to someone other than the village, that the person who buys the site will want to do something historically with it. And I don't know what the chances of that is, but it would be very hard at this time for me to sort of support this project. Thank you.
Robert?
Reading through the inspector's report, it does, and I know that he said that he or she said that there wasn't anything really significant, but the line about the roof may need to be replaced, would that not be considered major? I know it says that they weren't able to tell because it was freezing and dry when they did the inspection, but because I feel like we've had some businesses down on Main Street that had roofs that needed to be replaced that ended up being kind of costly.
Yeah, I mean, fair to say that any new roof is going to be a major project. Although I think, to paraphrase Dave, the inspector who did the report, it's not something that is structurally significant, making the property uninhabitable. Although seriously, that's not a cheap repair.
No, that's
It's
why.
probably a complex building too, with its various dormers and kind of joints and complex additions that it's seen.
That's probably, in reading the report, my biggest concern that I see on there. I mean, it's nice to see that it's ADA, it has ADA compliance. It's always a concern. As far as the use goes, unfortunately, I don't see anything different this time through than some of the criticisms I've had in the past. Outside of it, still seems we would be buying something and then deciding afterwards what to do with it. And I still struggle with that concept of buying without a plan in place, like a solid plan. So I'm still a bit neutral on this one at this point.
Tricia?
This is actually one I've given a lot of thought about since our last conversations. I think in the meantime, especially because there are tenants currently occupying the spaces, that this would be one where potentially the village and the board of community development authority could be helping to actively find other kind of redevelopers or investors that could invest in the space with the understanding that the village would like to see, what the village would like to see, and then hopefully the village would be proactively helping to support whatever private investments would come into play to help make this happen. Because I think it does have a lot of potential. I think the site, just given its location kind of in the heart of behind Lone Girl and the depot, the chamber building, has so many different like flexibility and use potentials that it could have, that it would be interesting for somebody that had a creative mind in that way. So I think that's where I'm leaning in my opinion.
Kristen?
Yeah, I'm thinking along the same lines. I think I've been clear in hoping that something interesting and great would happen, because this is such an important space downtown. When looking at the inspectors list, and I'm very glad we got the inspection done, I think there's a lot that we could support as a village in this. If a private developer or a private entity did come forward and applied for TID dollars, provided it meets all of the other requirements for it. So for the moment, I'm comfortable with helping to market the property and not, eliminating the possibility of acquiring it at some point, but just being conservative in that approach right now.
Joe?
Every time I think through this, I kind of waffle back and forth, and I think we have a potentially great opportunity here. But like others have said, we don't have a purpose for it yet. And that's where I really wrestle with spending the kind of money we'd have to do to acquire this. If there was an option to acquire the Quonset hut that is off on the one side, I think that maybe changes the dynamic somewhat. If for no other reason, then we've got the right properties to be able to put them together and maybe make something work a little bit better. If we did acquire it, my gut feeling says there's been some additional add-ons and things to that building. Personally, I'd kind of like to see it go back to its original core structure, but I'm not sure what that would do to the ADA pieces and things like that have been put in place. So I think there's still an awful lot for us to look at and consider. I don't know that I'd be willing to move forward with it right now.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo a lot of the comments about, you need a plan for this, because obviously, I mean, yeah, we have tenants in the building, which is great, but I think some sort of vision of what are we going to use this for? Because, I mean, obviously this is not a site that's contaminated, but we've had multiple contaminated sites here in the community that we've cleaned up for public purposes in the past. And we've had at least some semblance of a vision. Here's what we're striving for with the property. And I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the information from the inspector is very good. I think, obviously the building is in relatively decent condition. It was pretty much the amount of investment that we had expected that we were going to need to do. But I do agree. I do think this is a property that would benefit from activation, done the right way with some sort of visioning. I have, had a number of residents, particularly those in the neighborhood, ask, it's a lot of money that you're talking about buying this property for, 550,000 that perhaps, if we had some kind of vision of what we were going to use it for, perhaps we could maybe negotiate something a little more reasonably priced if we are going to spend the money to buy it. Aaron?
Yeah, I'll agree with a lot of what's been said tonight. I'm glad we're did explore this, because I think when opportunities like this come up and it can be exciting and it can open doors. I'm curious, not to put you too much on the spot too, but do you have an idea of like what a park could look like in there? Or do you know if there's interest from the park department or committee? Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious too if, like Tricia had said, if there's some sort of partnership or way that some of these good ideas could still be used if someone else wants to take this challenge on, I guess. But
Ted, could this be a specific item in the comp plan review when you're kind of looking at the downtown, as they even have this one called out as part of some of the public input process or creative charrette type discussions?
For the block, even?
Maybe
That
in
whole
general
triangle
discussion,
there?
with general discussion in mind regarding the downtown, I think this would be appropriate also with the topic of parking being something that we have expressed concerns about in the past. I think that makes sense. A couple of follow-ups to the comments, and I appreciate all the board's comments here, and I feel that there's some clear messaging about not jumping right in here now without a plan. I would ask for, Tricia, if you could share with me the names of developers who you think we could work to attract. I will share that the best success the village has had in the past of attracting developer interest is in fact when the village has some level of control over a property, either owning it or having an option on the property, which then allows us to seek out development partners, and then they have knowledge that there's a willing partner for them in the process. So with that in mind, with the question about having a plan in place, the other thing we have in a very talented development community in the Madison area is to allow them to actually help us in considering how to repurpose the structure. Now, I'll just lay out a scenario. If the village were to either acquire an option on the property or own it outright, we would then be in a position to assemble an RFP to seek proposals from the development community about potential adaptive reuses or potential historic reuse. And we can actually lay out parameters within a proposal calling out certain requirements that we would expect of a development partner. Again, it's much easier for us to do that if we're in a position of control on the property. So I'm just kind of laying out some of my development history and background that I think would position us to best pursue that very thing. With that said, I'll share that we've had conversations with the property broker and have said, hey, if you do have, the village board might not do anything tonight to proceed with the purchase. But if you do have a potential buyer come along that's either very serious or makes a bona fide offer that you and the property owner want to consider, the village would appreciate the opportunity to be in continued dialogue with you and possibly have a crack at making our own offer if you're in that position. It's not a right of first refusal. I requested that on the village's behalf and they denied wanting to grant us a right of first refusal, but it's, I guess, an open door still if all of a sudden comes along someone who's interested in the property and is very serious. Also to the Quonset hut that's adjacent, that's owned by the Stotts family or one of the Stotts family members. I've made it clear to them that similar to the mill property, if that were something they'd be looking to sell because of its adjacency to Village Park and to Village right of way, we would be wanting to have a discussion with them about potential acquisition. They're aware of that. And they've said that if and when that time's come, they're willing to talk to us too. So those are things that we've done in the meantime in terms of communicating with the owners there.
So I wanted to point out that, and this goes back to my comment, and I'm glad that you brought up about RFPs. And I know that's one of the options in there. That's option 4, is that I think that's good. And if we did acquire it, you know, I would agree with that. We definitely go with option 4. I think what I'm trying to get at, and this maybe speaks, Tricia, to what you're talking about with the comp plan, is that in other municipalities, like they have made it their policy that they want to acquire these batches of land. Like I'll pick on Madison because they're big and easy, but like they have obviously specific parts of the city that they've worked to acquire and that they have, you know, specifically said, we want this type of development in this area. So we're going to work to acquire the land, and then we're going to put the RFP.
Bar no expense, whatever it
I know,
takes.
well, and I know we're not Madison. I want to make it very clear, but I mean, even Middleton has done something similar with some of their locations with like.
Windsor even.
Yeah, like the housing that they put next to Middleton Hills next to the Pick and Save, where they converted those two, I think it was 2 houses, and it's now like 16 units or something ridiculous that they managed to bulk up there. And you wouldn't even tell from looking at the street. Like, but they all had plans that this is where they wanted to go. And I think that's my biggest criticism is I get it that we're saying that we would love to do something with this, but it makes it better when, and it definitely telegraphs, I would think, to developers if we have already made the policy statement of like, we know this is what we want to have. So somebody doesn't come in here and then they say, I love your property, but I want to turn it into a restaurant. And then they're going to turn around to the village and they're going to say, oh, the water main doesn't work because, you know, the concern may be that there's not enough water that would even do the sprinkler system if they did the sprinkler system. And then they're coming back to the village and saying, now, you know, open up TID to make these water main improvements. And, you know, it kind of gets in like this equity situation now where it's like other business owners down on Main Street have done the work to improve their property. And they're looking at this and saying, you know, like, why not me kind of a thing, even though they were in the TID. So I think if we could set a solid plan of like, we want to, like we make it our policy, if land comes up, we want to acquire it and this is what we want it to be. I think that would make this a much easier conversation, in my opinion.
I agree that it probably would. And if the board wishes to see that sort of dive as we pursue the comp plan update, we can certainly do that. At the same time, if you want to call out this as a micro study area that you'd like us to pursue, you know, on its own merits, like we did with the Q corridor, for example, if that's something you'd like the village to consider, we can look at what a proposal for that sort of, I would call it micro study, what that would entail and how quickly we could do it and what it would cost.
What you're talking about, if you have a certain area that it's, you know, out there in a plan saying that we want to, you know, we want this or this there, or we want to keep those buildings or whatever, doesn't that just automatically drive up the price of those buildings if they go up for sale?
It can, but I mean, I would say that the free market kind of acts as a counterbalance. So we don't have to buy every piece of property that comes up for sale. So if they put up, I'll pick on Hofbrau House. Like, you know, there's people who think that is worth way more than they've tried to sell it in the past. I'm speaking my own opinion here, so don't sue the village. But I'm just saying, there's people who think it's worth more than that. And, you know, if like the village shows interest in a property like that, they might say, well, we're jacking up the price to 100,000. Well, the village doesn't have to buy it. So you don't have to make it in your policy that you will buy it. You can just say, we would consider it, so that when we do have things that go up for sale, we can have a much easier conversation, because we can say it is already our policy that we want to consider buying it. But we would already know what it is we want to do with the property, which I think would resolve some of the consternation we have up here, which is, you know, I think that we could probably come to an agreement that maybe we would pay, I'm just throwing this number out here, 550,000 for this property. But for some of the people up here, I think but we have to know what's going to be done with it if we're going to agree to that, because we don't want taxpayers to come up and say, great, you bought the property, what are you going to do with it? And then we would say, I don't know. And they're going to say, well, why'd you buy the property?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think using the comp plan to do it, just because, you know, I've talked about in the past, that whole kind of triangular block. All right, you get this one property, well, you've got kind of a little non-conforming alley there and a residential home with a swimming pool in the back. You know, you kind of want to look at that whole block as a cohesive deal, because if we want it to really work, yeah, you can activate the one building, but if you want that block to work, you're going to need more than just that one building to do it.
I will say, I'll chime in. And I agree that we should probably be looking at all potential properties that we would acquire and address them in the comp plan and address these issues at the downtown neighborhood, historic neighborhood district level at least. One of the downsides of that for this particular property is by the time the comp plan is done, that this property will most likely have been sold, or the owner of the property will have been left kind of wondering what's happening to it. So I myself wouldn't mind if we continue discussing this maybe at the next meeting and come back with an idea of what would it look like to have a little bit more data or a little bit more visioning. You know, what would it cost? Could it be something that we carve out and get done earlier in the comp plan? You know, a way of kind of getting that answer sooner rather than later. It's a great opportunity. I'm in agreement with everybody that really in order to do it, we need to have a vision that justifies spending the money on doing it. And that's a change from my last couple of meetings, because I really do see this as a unique opportunity right now, but very much listening to what everyone else has said.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Erin. This isn't in the packet, so I just want to make sure I'm remembering this right. The parking lot there's no village-owned entrance into that
No,
parking lot.
there are easements on
Okay.
either end of the lot that are permanent in
Okay.
deeds of the properties.
But it's that also on South Street, that's the case too.
Correct,
Okay.
because there's a weird boundary with, actually, it's owned by the Chinese restaurant,
Yeah, okay.
actually.
I was just gonna add, I think I heard you, Todd, and I think there's some homework that could be done over the next couple of weeks. Kristen, to your point, if you want to bring it back for more discussion, that we could have. I'm almost looking at like a certified site type of a project where whether or not the village goes forward and purchases it, that we understand all of the different options that there might be, what the support might be in different shapes and forms, whether it's TIF or a state grant that would be applied for or something like that, that would come into play, and kind of have it all up on the table. So we have all of the different factors and limitations depending on what, encumbrances may come with the building outside of what the building inspector had identified. But I also think it's good to keep talking about it, because it's a
Definitely.
great site for our community. It's a great site.
Yeah, I would definitely support, bringing it back at the next meeting for further discussion. I think, seeing the nods, I think we're all in agreement on that.
The other thing that, if I'm an owner of any property but this one we're talking about, in that block area you're talking about, and I watch this meeting, I'm gonna be like, what's going on? They're talking about my block now. And I'm not opposed at a staff level to having just big picture conversations with, we're not talking about a lot of properties, with the 4 or 5 owners there, simply to say, hey, what are your plans? What's your 5-year, 10-year window look like for what you hope at your property? So those may be worthwhile conversations. If they weren't happening now, they would certainly, we'd want them to happen as part of the comp plan process. But I think at this point, being that our discussion is kind of open the scope of this site a little bit in the discussion, those are discussions worth having. And I think just open, sitting down, not in any sort of threatening way, but simply to say, what are you envisioning, property owner X, Y, and Z? So that might be helpful too. And unless there's objection to us doing that, we're willing to have those staff level conversations with the owners.
Yeah, I think that would be a worthwhile conversation to have, for sure.
Okay, I think that'll help us all.
Anything else on this, or? Okay. Last item, discuss and take action on study conducted by the Wisconsin Policy Forum with Waunakee Area EMS and Middleton EMS.
Do you want me to let you, well,
Yeah.
you're most familiar
Yeah,
with.
he could kind of give a summary, because,
study.
obviously, people, they hear, at least a couple of people have told me, well, they're hearing what's going on with the fire department. What are we, starting here? So if you could just kind of explain that to people that this is a totally different situation
This
here.
is, yes, please, this study was conducted by the Wisconsin Policy Forum. They had approached Middleton area EMS, they're just Middleton EMS, Waunakee area EMS, to look at a feasibility study of what it would look like given the two communities having the growth that they're having, to consider combining the two services between Waunakee area EMS and Middleton EMS. Some of you may have heard, maybe I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, there was talk of including as a third party in this Cross Plains, but needs changed over time, so they reduced it back to Waunakee and Middleton. So what the way that they went through this process is they met with both departments and they looked at their numbers, their call volumes, areas served, how fast they were getting to calls, all those things. And they said, all right, if we ran different scenarios, some of which involve staffing new ambulances, some of which involve building new buildings, some of which involve doing nothing and remaining separate, what would they anticipate that it would cost each district to do so? And the report that's in the packet has a summary in there that basically has a few options that were placed in there. There are option 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And as you can see, this is on page, I believe, 69 of the board packet, if you're in the full one, down in their conclusion. That's where the 3 options are, or I'm sorry, that's where the 5 options are. And you could see that with some of the numbers that are in there, numbers start looking more favorable for Middleton as we go further to the right, and less favorable for Waunakee area EMS. Now, for the reason I asked for private discussion is because at some point the village is going to need to understand its bargaining position in regards to the EMS district, and that's what I believe would be discussed in closed session. But for the open session, since this report is public record, it's going to be released by Wisconsin Policy Forum officially later this week. They're meeting with Middleton's City Council, I believe, tomorrow.
Correct.
So what you see in here is basically there's a lot of things in here that are very educated guesses, is what I'd say. You may disagree with how much it costs to build a new station. You may disagree with how much a new ambulance crew costs. You'd be right to do that because even they stated, Trustee Fry would happen to not happen. She intentionally came to that meeting, so she got to hear it as well. You know, their opinion of site construction for stations probably a bit low compared to reality. And there's some very real issues that we need to address as a district regardless. What we learned from the report is that the call response time for Westport has become pretty long. If anybody knows the geography of Westport and how that district is, there is a retirement community called Westshire down in the southeast corner of Westport. It's actually closer to Madison than it is to Waunakee. And that's where the majority of their calls are because that's just how it is. And Westport admitted in the meeting that they probably need to start having conversations with Madison instead because the report indicates we should build a station down in Westport right near Westshire because that's where all the calls are. And immediately you can see the problem with that, which is that doesn't benefit Springfield, Vienna, Dane, like even Waunakee. Like we would be stretching our service down just to service one little area of Westport, and Westport acknowledges that as well. So we have a lot of things that we would need to work through as a district before we made any additional choices. And there's also another reality in the opinion of the EMS director is that because we added in an extra, we did a new staffing solution in the last budgetary cycle. The stress upon Waunakee area EMS doesn't exist like it does for Middleton. It's our belief that Middleton needs expansion of services way more than Waunakee area EMS, especially based off of response times and call volume. So there's a lot to digest from this report. If you read all the way through it, there are some obvious questions. If you look at it, if we're combined with Middleton, if all the calls are down in Middleton and we have a call up in up in Waunakee or even north of Waunakee, like, do we have to detach somebody from all the way from Middleton to come up to Waunakee to serve us, even though we have a station right here because they were happened to be off doing calls that Middleton needed. There's questions on, are we potentially using all the staff we could be using already in there? So there's a lot of questions that we need to ask on this. To address any concerns in the community for similarity to the fire department, this is nothing like the fire department. This is a completely different conversation just about future growth needs and understanding, if we did need to place another station, where would it be? And if the best choice is to combine with Middleton, because generally the thought is combined costs are cheaper. If you look at the options, I don't disagree. I don't agree with how much they say, how much it would cost to build a new station, but I do agree it's going to be cheaper to combine with another entity to do that. The question is whether we need to do it today, because generally we would be looking at combining if we had an immediate need to do expansion, and currently we just don't have the volume that says we need to do that.
And, I would say a lot of reading this study, kind of a summation, is Middleton saves money and we pay more. That's a lot of the options that you see in here. And obviously some of the issues, in Middleton, they're needing to add a third ambulance. They have, if in Middleton near the Costco, they have a behavioral health facility, a psychiatric hospital, if you will. And they were having similar to the situation going on at Westshire, where they would call the EMTs anytime they needed a lift assist or something minor. So they have addressed that problem. The other issue that the study does not consider, which it really hasn't been in the media like the Westport deal, but the town of Middleton is actually attempting to incorporate. And I think that's the likelihood of that going through is probably low, just because of the fact that driving from one end of the town to the other, you cannot do it and stay in the community. You have to leave it at least 3 times to actually continuously go through it. So if that were to happen, the town stays, possibly at some point, they would dissolve, similar to you've seen with the town of Madison and Blooming Grove and Burke, where Madison would get some of it and Middleton would get some of it. So, just looking at where the border would be, if you cut it across on the map, well, that's a third of their service area that would basically be gone, and some of their longest call response. So, and we don't know how that's going to go yet. Obviously, that's going to be a year and a half or whatever, but that alone, their station is awfully close to the southern border of Middleton now. Well, do we need to talk about potentially relocating that station so it's more centrally located? So, more of those kind of variables need to happen in order for any sort of informed decision on this to be made, I think. Anyone else have thoughts on this? Yes.
I think one of the things that we have to consider, yes, there are financial aspects of this to look at, but there are also aspects of patient care and services which are very important. And when I look on page 14 and 17 and look at Waunakee area EMS population for the district compared to Middleton, of course, Waunakee's more spread out as far as square miles, which brings up the scenario that Robert brought up where if we combined with Middleton, the district could be so big that the ambulances could be at the other end of the district and have to come into Waunakee, and it makes the service time longer. But when I look at page 14 and 17 and then look at page 30, the difference in the budgets, it's a lot different. And building a building is very costly, which Robert brought up. I don't think it needs to be done now, but perhaps we have a third ambulance, perhaps setting something up where you can have a third shift. Or one of the issues that the EMS has with the fire department now, sometimes the fire department needs to provide a driver for the EMS for certain calls. I heard and I know that there have been people who would be willing to volunteer and join the EMS to drive, and they're turned down. I don't know why that is, but that would, make it so that the fire department wouldn't be called so much and make the crews so that they're not so expensive for Waunakee to run. those are just some of my ideas.
Any other thoughts from anyone else?
Yeah, I'll add, we thought this was an important question to ask, and to spend the time and energy to get the answer for, so I'm glad we did it. One of the things I want to note, if you look on table 17, I just want to note that when you look at mutual aid given and mutual aid received, DeForest is, a partner of ours probably more often than we've discussed in the past with regards to mutual aid. And it has nothing to do with whether or not we combine with Middleton, but I just think it's important to note that our neighbors to the what is it, northeast of us, have also been important partners in keeping Waunakee safe and us in keeping them safe.
And I also think, this whole deal, it does prompt a good discussion about borders of these districts as well. As many of you know, the EMS district border has remained relatively unchanged since 1975. And the woman who drafted that is now 95 years old. And obviously we've had more development and growth since then. I mean, obviously the EMS district border, and I know, Robert's talked about this, and the town of Springfield is very concerned about the EMS district border doesn't match the fire district border. So, it creates confusion for the dispatchers down at the county emergency communications center of who are we supposed to be sending. When you look at the map of the district there, we go all the way down to Mendota County Park. Westport is not split off a little bit like it is for the fire department. If there's a call down at the greenhouse down there, well, it'd be a heck of a lot closer for Middleton to get there, but we have to go all the way down there. So that's another thing that we ought to be looking at when we have these discussions as well.
I want to clarify for anybody who's listening you'd be forgiven if you didn't know the nuances on this, because I certainly did not when I joined on the EMS board. If it is a medical emergency, like extreme medical, like they have, I can't remember the exact term they use for that code or whatever it is. They will send the closest available unit regardless of whose district or what. They dispatch knows where it is. So to Sam's point, it can be frustrating with some of those borders being what they are. But if there is somebody having a medical emergency, they page out whoever's closest. It might even be, we've heard stories of it where it's our EMS is just driving back from the hospital and they're in the city of Madison and they just happen to be the closest unit right next to where it's happening. They will send them over there. So for anybody who thinks at that level of emergency that they would not get service, they definitely do not delay on sending that.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on this?
Maybe one thing I'll just note, just procedural to understand where we want to go with the discussion tonight and also what's next for the EMS, your board, Robert. What's next for the EMS Commission's discussion?
So the EMS Commission did not meet this month, but will be meeting in April. The next steps are going to be after Middleton, which is hearing it tomorrow night, has their steps. We're going to get together and act as a board and probably schedule a meeting. Like we're going to ask for a joint meeting with Middleton so that we can have a discussion. Again, the purpose that I had asked for the closed session tonight is just so that we can't meet in closed session as an EMS district because that's not how it works as far as we're aware. But for the purpose of the village's stance, as I am just a representative of the village, I wanted to know what our bargaining position would be for how I should proceed in that regard.
So I know Attorney Kleinmeyer wasn't available for tonight's meeting. I'm sure his advice, if he had it for going into closed session, would be a very narrow scope to make sure that the discussion in closed session isn't as much about the scope of the study, the data in the study, the information shared in the study. I think if there's more questions that you have about the study results, by all means, I think now's in open session is a good time to ask those questions. So then Robert can take those for clarification back to the EMS body that he represents us on. The potential for the results of this study to have an impact on our intergovernmental agreement between five other communities that are part of the agreement for governance and oversight on the district. If there's discussion relating to that, Robert, that you think this board can provide guidance on that will help you in upcoming discussions with EMS, then that would be appropriate for closed session.
6 other communities. Sorry, I always forget Dane and Dane.
So it's 7 total communities or 6 including us?
6, Dane, Waunakee, Westport, Vienna, Springfield.
Okay, so 6 including us.
And obviously you've indicated how Westport feels about this. You know, what were some of the reactions of the other communities in the district at this meeting in terms of reviewing the report?
In my opinion, there was kind of a united, and I joined with them on this opinion that, you know, not a big fan of subsidizing Middleton's EMS on some of those options. We would clearly need to negotiate so that if we did explore this, and you could see in the summary report, it talks about a phased approach, which it may not be a bad idea to look at a phased approach if we did have that direction, but we would need to work out the details with Middleton and how much they're contributing, because again, the immediate gain of a phased-in approach, even based on the report, was that they would gain in Middleton. And so, you know, the smaller municipalities kind of stated like, well, why would I pay extra for Middleton to have better EMS service? And I get that there's a certain component of this that's, you know, we're talking about people's lives here. We want to make sure people are protected, and that if they need, you know, EMS services, that somebody is, when you're hurt, sick, you know, whatever, you don't care who answers the call. You just hope that somebody gets you to the hospital on time. But they, you know, they don't want to inadvertently end up subsidizing everybody else in that process. And I think there is some validity into that opinion.
It's good that they share in some of the same concerns that we have.
Yes, and Westport also indicated, like I said in the summary, that they would speak with Madison, since Medic and Fire 10 are right up the street on Northport there from them, and they are vastly closer than the station is here for that. So they were thinking maybe they could work with the city on a carve out, and then we would just update the borders so that would be Madison instead of Waunakee area EMS. But again, that was all that they said at the time. So we don't know if that's what they're doing.
So from a procedural standpoint, do you think it would be necessary for us to go into close? Would you like us to go into closed? And obviously this is an item that you requested.
I would, because I think that we need to discuss the impact on the IGA, as Todd indicated.
You're talking the impact in terms of if we were to merge, or just our own impact in
Correct.
general?
Just for the village's stance on changing the IGA.
My other question, I'm not intending to prevent you from going into closed session. That's not what I'm doing. I just want to make sure that your closed session discussion is useful for all of you. Is the upcoming meeting that EMS is going to have hopefully jointly with Middleton, is that meeting going to provide additional useful information that you think would better inform the board for a closed session in the future, or would tonight's discussion in closed session still be beneficial?
I think you're going to probably have future closed session discussion as well, because we don't know, because Middleton hasn't met yet. We don't know anything about what their stance is on this report. If I was in Middleton's shoes, I would look at this report and think, great, let's get Waunakee area EMS to merge with us tomorrow, because it solves a lot of problems immediately. And I get they're reasonable. I don't think they're actually going to say that, but it definitely favors them. And, you know, if there are requests from changes from some of the other signers of that IGA, I would assume that means we would need to have a new IGA in general. So you're right. Maybe tonight isn't appropriate. Maybe we wait until after Middleton does it. If we can in public discussion just say, you know, if you want me to go back and say the village is neutral on this until we have the further meeting, I can take that approach. I just want to make sure that we have clarity of purpose on that.
I think we just need more information after you meet with Middleton at the board, and then we can probably go from there.
Because I think we've given you fairly sufficient that we agree with your position on this, to be clear to them that, listen, we're not going to subsidize you. And I've already told the mayor that myself, that I'm not comfortable with the people that live here subsidizing your residents. I'm not cool with that.
Well, I'm going to defer to you, Robert, on what you want to gain from the board this evening. And again, comfortable if you feel closed session would be important.
If we're fine just saying, and Kristen, I haven't heard from you, but if we're all fine on just saying we're going to stay neutral for now until we hear more, that's all I need. We don't need to go in closed session for that. I was going to give I felt it was, if somebody just wasn't comfortable discussing, like if they felt we were starting to get into a bargaining point, that we would want to not do that in open session.
Makes sense.
Since I do know that everybody else watches our videos, since I get told that regularly.
Yeah. But as long as you're comfortable, you understand what the concerns are and you're comfortable advocating for that, I think that's perfectly fine.
I'm
So-
good.
But let's, before we send you off without closed session, maybe we just go around the room and give an opinion on whether we think this is neutral or not, or we should go into closed session just to make sure we've got our bases covered.
Oh, yeah, that's why I was asking. You've been quiet, so I wanted to hear what you had to say.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so I'm neutral on it. I do think more information. Right now, I don't see a compelling reason, but that doesn't mean there isn't one, and I just haven't seen it in the data yet.
I'd echo the neutral. I see nods here, so I think we're all in agreement on that neutrality. Obviously, it's a very, good, thorough report. Certainly don't want to cast that away at this point. But yeah, definitely more information on how the city of Middleton and their council feels about this. So, good.
Just to close out, for anybody, I know everything we have in there says draft, but the report will be released by Wisconsin Policy Forum, so the public will have access to it, I believe, on Wednesday.
Well, it's in our packet as well. If
I mean,
anybody
the
wants to
final
go in-
version.
Oh,
will be
the
out
final
there.
version, I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Want to make sure I understood something, Robert, that you said earlier. The EMS board, I believe, has the authority to go into closed session. Did I misunderstand what you said earlier?
Their attorney did not feel that, they felt that individual municipalities could have their own closed session, but when
Oh.
it came to the report itself.
Okay, on the
district would
topic.
not- Yeah.
They are able to go in closed session.
Yeah,
They-
oh, yes,
They
but
just
we
weren't
have,
advised on
yes.
this topic, at least at that point, that they could.
Yes.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this item? Otherwise, I would look for one final motion.
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, y'all.